Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. As I promised, I'm going to repot this Ficus microcarpa into this container. This is the container that we had in the nursery that was pretty correct as far as sizing goes. It is an unglazed. Tropical trees, traditionally I like to put them in glazed pots, but this one is the right depth, it's the right width, it's an oval just like I wanted, and it'll repot easily. So this is the one we're going to put it in for now. If I find the perfect pot that's glazed in the future, I'll change it out. But until then, I think this pot will be just fine for the health of this tree. Today we're going to go over how to prep the pot, how to clean it, also how to get a tree out of a pot that may have a lip. Like this one has a difficult lip, and it's been in this for a few years, so it's pretty full of roots. And hopefully we don't get rained out, because I hear a front and I feel a couple little drops on my head. So we'll see what happens. So I've done a few repotting videos for you guys over the years. Granted, more than likely when I was doing them myself, the production value was horrible, but the information is sound. I'm blessed now to have my wife help with the editing. It doesn't mean the content's going to be any better, but hopefully the production value is a little better. There's a few different ways to do this. I've been taught many ways over the years, or been shown many ways, but if you look at the holes, usually what you can do is you can do the double loop method. You make a loop, that loop is going to set on the outside of the hole, and then you make another loop. And ideally what you want is for this to be able to set right inside of the hole with the loops on the outside of the hole, just like that. That way you can open this up, and that's great. Another way to do it, which I've seen and been taught, is instead of just making the loops, you pinch them out, and you have like a pin. Instead of having the loops, you have like a pin. And it gives you a little bit tighter angles. And they say that if you have a hole that doesn't have wire holes and you're using this, this will help keep the screen flat. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I'm just going to shorten this other piece because it's a little bit longer. But you just pinch it like this, and instead of it being round, it's like a pin. And again, you test it by sliding it through the hole, and if it fits nice and tight, it's the right size. Okay, so this is the galvanized screen that was just cut, and again, I like galvanized screen. This is 1/8 inch. I don't like window screening. It doesn't have any turgidity, right? It's not really tough. This actually resists bending very well. Just easily when you pull the wires up, especially if you have to use the holes to tie your tree in. This kind of gives you a little bit extra safety net from lifting up and dropping the soil out. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So now that we've done these two pins, you can just slide this right through it, just like that, right? Pretty simple. And then you just put it right in the hole, just like that. And then on the bottom, you lift them up. And make sure that it's tight when you do this. You don't want to have it raised up, because we don't want the soil to fall out. People always ask, well, why are the holes so big? Well, you want to have really big holes because you want perfect drainage with these. But the trade-off is you have big giant holes that'll your soil will wash right through. So the screen is invaluable. Again, that kind of gives you an idea of how hopefully this is square, of how I put the wires on. Then once you put the wire in and you have the screens down, the next thing you need to do is put wire that'll tie the tree into the pot. And the reason why we do that is when you just put a tree in a container, you don't want those roots to shift around constantly. What'll happen is if you get a lot of shifting, once the trees are here, let's say we have a heavy wind or maybe it gets jostled, every time that happens, the little roots break or crack or snap. Tying the tree into the pot, now the trunk won't move. It's braced in, it's stable. It gives the tree time to get a lot of fine feeder roots so the tree can get acclimated into the pot faster. That's why we tie them in. I've had people ask, will you take the wire off afterwards? No, there's no reason to. It's aluminum wire. It doesn't hurt the roots in 2 years when it's time to repot, or 3 years when it's time to repot, or 4 years. The aluminum wire, I'll just go underneath and I'll just cut it. Just take my wire cutters and just cut this underneath. And what I'm doing, by the way, this has wire holes, so I'm sliding it right with, putting it right from underneath on the wire holes. That way I have wire up top to tie the tree in. So I find, the next thing I do is I find the front. Most bonsai pots obviously have 2 fronts. Maybe you have a flaw, maybe you have an interesting patina, maybe you have, if it's glazed, you may have a little bit of a different accent on 2 sides of glazes. That happens a lot. Sometimes on a production pot, when they detail out the edges, one side looks better than the other, and you want the pot to harmonize with the tree. So I'm trying to find a side that I like better, and frankly, pretty similar on both. But I like this side better because there's a little edging on the lip here that's not the same on this side. And I know it's silly, but I like this detail better on this. So that's going to be my front of the tree. I'm just setting this off to the side because the next thing I need to do is get this bad boy out of the original pot that it was in. And it's been in that pot for, I think, 2 years. So the way we take these out of their old pots, just like I told you on that one, the very first thing I do is I cut the roots on, I cut the wire underneath. Because this tree's wired up 2-3 years ago. So I cut the wire, right? That's the first thing I do. Second thing I do is I hope and see if there's a way I can... It ain't moving. Because this guy's a brick and he's got a lip. I will tell you, sometimes you got to break the pot. And I know that sucks. I've never broken a pot on purpose, but I've had other people do it. And it's just basically a contest of wills, and at a certain point, they're just tired. And it's a brick of roots. What I like to use is this is a Masakuni tool that's specifically designed to cut the roots because it's going to be hitting living cambium. I do sterilize it. I use Lysol water 50/50. I was taught that by Mr. Nagatashi. Everybody knows him who knows bonsai. He was in California at the time. He was a guest artist at our club back in 2002, 2003, and he called it miracle juice. Lysol water 50/50, lemon scented. He said you only use lemon scented. So basically what I do is I just kind of keep going around the perimeter, cutting roots. I can feel the roots releasing. This is really something that you got to do whenever you have these pots that have these lips, unfortunately. So the way you avoid this is you put a tree in here that is not a real aggressive rooter. You have something in here that maybe is a lot slower to grow, maybe more feminine growth habits, a lot less aggressive. This ficus went in this pot because at the time it was a pot I had that was pretty close to the size that I wanted. This guy has grown 4 inches canopy since he was put in this pot, so visually it's a little bit too small for him now. Okay, the next thing that I do once I've taken it out of the pot is I want to take the top 1/2 inch to 1 inch off. And that's just in case we have old moss, old weed seeds, old organic fertilizer. Just want to get all that off. Also, if it has a nice nabari, or if it has a flawed nabari, and I need to come in there and cut some of the original, flawed nabari away to improve it. This is a great time to really assess what this tree looks like. A lot of times we do this and, it's been in a pot for a few years. We discover that it's time to raise it into the new pot a half an inch or an inch to really showcase that improved nabari that's happened over the last couple of years. I don't want to have a matted amount of roots on the bottom. That may inhibit drainage. Also, if they're really long, I'll trim them back just to put them in the bigger pot. Don't have to trim really hard because we're potting up, we're not maintaining the same size pot. So when you put these in a pot, you don't want to put them in the very center. You always want them a little bit off center. What I like to do is put a little mound of soil on the bottom. Now I've seen a lot of videos where, especially with really large bonsai, they put a coarse drainage layer, and I just had somebody ask me about this. I don't do that on any of these smaller trees. I don't put multiple layers. I just put the same layer from bottom to top, and I don't get a shelf where it dries really fast. It has a consistent drainage. Whenever I repot these, they're full of roots and they're happy. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's the way I was taught. This is how I do it. Now, really large trees in a great big giant pot, I do add a lot of drainage layers, a couple inches, and that's mostly because I have this really coarse soil that I don't know what to do with because I can't use it for anything else. So I put it in the really big pots, frankly, to save some money because bonsai soil is not cheap. The soil that we use is Hyuga pumice, black lava, red lava, akadama in equal parts. This particular one has California pumice because Hyuga pumice order was late coming in, so it's really light. I don't like the white. I like the gray a little bit better. I really like Hyuga, but that's personal preference. So the next thing I do, again, I find the front that I like. Make sure that's the right front. I've kind of looked at this tree. The apex, the crown is kind of coming a little bit to the left. So I'm going to put this tree, and the first branch is on the left. I'm going to put this tree slightly in the right in this pot. I'm not going to put it centered. It's going to be pretty close to center, but it's not going to be in the center. Once I put that on that mound, I work that soil underneath so I don't have an air gap underneath. You pull, then twist. Pull, then twist. Don't pull and twist. That's how wire breaks. Next thing I do is I feed the soil in and around the roots. Once I've manually put a lot of that soil in, I come back in here with my chopstick, start on one side, and I work it. Work it in and around the roots. If I have an air gap, just like we talked about earlier, I feed that soil in and around. I do not want an air gap in there. I need it evenly compressed all the way around the roots. Another really important aspect once you do this is that you have a little lip around the perimeter of the soil. That way when you water, you don't wash the soil away. If you come in and it's a little high, take some of it out. It's okay. So now that this is cleaned up, if this were a tree that was very sensitive to roots drying out and had very shallow roots, I'd put a little bit of shredded sphagnum on the surface. However, this variety of ficus doesn't need that extra humidity. They're almost a succulent. They're not, but they're almost a succulent. They tolerate dryness very well. So this is placed just off center, just to the right. It has a beautiful first branch. As you work your way up, the branches get thinner. The pot, if you're not sure how big of a pot or how deep of a pot or what color pot you like, the standard rules which are open to interpretation, right? This is art, but the standard guidelines is if it's a tropical tree, especially one that fruits and flowers, or a tree that fruits and flowers, it goes into a glazed container. These are guidelines. I've seen beautiful azaleas in unglazed containers in Japan that are exquisite. So this is not a steadfast rule, it's their guidelines. This guy, I wanted to put him in a glazed container. However, now that I've put him in here, I think it's a beautiful pot, especially if I'm going to display this tree as a deciduous tropical. I display it with no leaves. You can do that. I don't hate this. I don't hate this tree at all. Once the leaves are off, the trunk is the focus, and the twigginess. So the pot will not take away from the focus of the twigginess as an unglazed pot. So, but what do you think? Also, if you're not sure what size container that you can put this in, if you look at the longest dimension of the tree, whether it's this one is the width in this case, and if you look at that measurement and you look at approximately 2/3 the longest dimension, will give you the width of the pot. Also, if you're not sure about the depth of the pot, look at the thickness of the trunk. The thickness of the trunk ideally should be the thickness of the pot. Okay, you can have a little bit thinner. Now the pot becomes more focused, but in some areas they consider a really shallow pot with a really thick trunk. It doesn't look stable. It doesn't look like it has stability. That's why I didn't go with a shallower pot. I could have, but I wanted the visual stability of this tree. So, I love this tree. I think it looks great in this pot. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. You think if I cut myself really bad on film, I'd get a lot of views? So much blood!
First trip to the hospital as a married couple.
I think this should be in. I think that'll be great.